The man just casually lifted his hand, yet it left the top magician utterly stunned. It was because he had just cast a spell without an incantation. This scene was unbelievable to everyone present. But what they didn't know was that in my previous life, I had already mastered the study of magic completely. However, I chose a different path, and in the end, at just 30 years old, I reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship. I slayed countless monsters, protecting this continent. But my greatest regret was that I could never use magic. You see, magicians absorb the magical energy that flows through the atmosphere to perform supernatural miracles. The way of the sword is to forge extraordinary skills from within one's own body. On this continent, magic and swordsmanship are two inherently opposing paths. I chose the path of the sword, which meant I could never use magic. However, I never really liked swordsmanship. I only chose it because my father made me. I thought I would be trapped with this sword for my entire life, until the day I died in battle. But fate gave me a chance to start over. And just like that, I was back in the year I turned 14. I stared at the village before me, so familiar, yet so strange. I couldn't believe it was real. As I stood there in a daze, my hand suddenly brushed against the letter. I looked at it and it felt so familiar. It was the invitations from the magic and swordsmanship academies. I looked at my faint reflection in the water. In this life, should I choose a sword again? Just then, I heard familiar footsteps behind me. I turned around, just as I thought. It was my imposing father. Startled, I immediately shot to my feet. My father spoke to me sternly. You seem to have grown arrogant about your skills lately. And have started neglecting your training. I wasn't being arrogant. I was just agonizing over whether I should reveal my longing for magic to my father. My father is a master swordsman, with countless disciples. As his son, I was naturally forced to learn the way of the sword from a young age. One day, I excitedly told my father that someone had shown me magic. I said I wanted to wield such brilliant and beautiful magic, too. My father's face turned pale as he said, "Magic is merely a trick used by the weak. As my son, you will only ever wield a sword in this life." His command was like a shackle. But what he didn't know was that this time, I was going to shatter it with my own hands. I've had enough of this life. I'm going to walk the path I truly desire. I made up my mind to become a magician. Last time, my father forcibly awakened my sword aura. To avoid making the same mistake again, I decided I had to master magic first. So, I headed into the forest. I needed to find a secluded place to practice. I made my way to a large boulder. I recalled the method a magician had taught me in my past life. That magician told me, magic fills the air all around us. As long as you can sense that magic, you should be able to draw it into your circuits. I'm no longer the sword saint. The senses from my past life still remain in this body. I should be able, even in this body, to feel the intangible flow of magic. I sat cross-legged on the stone. A purple energy began to swirl around me. The power of my past life was awakening at this very moment. A strange sensation washed over me. I could feel the flow of magic. I clenched my fists, overjoyed. I did it. Suddenly, I sensed an unfamiliar presence nearby, and it was slowly approaching. Curious as to what it could be, I headed deeper into the forest. But in the forest, I couldn't sense the presence of any living creature. Just as I was moving forward, suddenly, an invisible force slammed into me, sending me flying. I was completely stunned and collapsed to my knees. The stone man actually came to life. Light was even pouring out from the cracks in the stone. What in the world was this? I was still trying to figure out what this giant rock even was. A woman walked out from behind the stone. I recognized her instantly. It was the one who had taught me magic before. Her name was Merlin. She asked me what I was doing here. Was I here for the results of her research? I dropped to one knee. My eyes were locked on her. It was fate that had pushed me before her once again. Her expression darkened as she delivered a harsh warning. If you want to live, you'd better think very carefully before you speak. I'd heard tales of her on countless battlefields in the harsh, frozen north. She single-handedly held up an entire army. With just that golem, she could hold off thousands of soldiers. The scene shifts. She's sitting on a throne, her icy gaze scrutinizing me. My hands were bound in cold shackles. I never thought we'd meet again under these circumstances. She looked down on me and asked what school of magic I belonged to. When I didn't answer, she angrily tapped her staff and began chanting a spell. A fiery red magical array flared to life around me, and the shackles on my hands instantly tightened. So I quickly said, "When you captured me, I didn't resist. I'm not your enemy." Then she stood up, raised her wand, and brought it crashing down on me. She said, "Farewell, nameless mage." Faint golden light spread from the wand as it slammed down hard on my head. I was kneeling, completely unable to move. I cried out, "I already told you, I'm not a mage at all." Hearing this, she froze. A playful smile touched Merlin's lips. What a pathetic excuse. Then, she gently pressed her fingers to the top of my head. Suddenly, her eyes went wide. She stared at me in disbelief. Apparently, she had sensed my magic. But there was no magical energy flowing through my circuits. Who would have thought? 1 second she was radiating killing intent. And the next, she was offering me a cup of coffee. she said haughtily. I was mistaken just now. But I won't be apologizing. The scene shifts again, and somehow, the two of us are sitting on a sofa, chatting casually. My eyes widened in shock when I heard she was Professor Isabel from the Magic Academy. If I could learn from her at the academy where she teaches, I might be able to channel magic into my own circuits. So I looked at her with pleading eyes and begged her to teach me how to manifest magic within my body. You can't even sense magic, and you want me to teach you? You're useless. Sweat trickled down my cheek. I have to convince you today. Suddenly, I noticed something was wrong with the golem beside her. The golem picked up the coffee, supposedly to give her a refill, but the next second, it poured the coffee right on Professor Isabel's head. I shouted in alarm, Professor, are you alright? It turned out the circuit near the magic stone on its right shoulder was blocked, which made it malfunction. Coffee dripped down Professor Isabel's face. She just stared at me in amazement. How did you know my golem was malfunctioning? I said, a little awkwardly, my eyes they can see magic. She grabbed my hand and stared at it for a full 3 seconds. The shock on her face slowly faded, and the corners of her mouth curved into a smile. She smiled as she agreed to teach me how to use magic. Oscar, you've managed to pique my interest. I hope you won't disappoint me. This time, I'm taking back everything that's mine. The man simply waved his hand, yet it left the S-rank mage of the Magic Academy stunned right where she stood. He had perfectly condensed an advanced form of mana. Everyone found it unbelievable. How could a new student be so ridiculously strong? But what they didn't know was that in my past life, I had already thoroughly mastered magic. The next day, I followed Isabel into the Magic Academy. I asked her curiously, what do I need to do to make mana flow through my circuits? As long as you're alive, mana is already flowing naturally through your body. And how it flows through your circuits? You just need to feel the power circulating inside your body, and then imagine injecting it into this formula. When I heard that, it all suddenly clicked. So that's how it works. She told me that this kind of magic usually takes at least a month of practice to complete. She took out a magic scroll engraved with a specific spell for me. I happily took the magic scroll and said, I'll give it my all. Then, I immediately took the scroll and began to practice seriously. I tried to feel the power flowing inside my body, but it didn't seem to be working. Just then, I suddenly had an idea. I just needed to pull my consciousness inward, just like when I practiced my sword aura. I closed my eyes tightly and began to imagine I was practicing my sword aura. I could feel my consciousness separating from my body. Suddenly, I could feel the power of mana flowing inside me. Teacher Isabel was right. The mana is right here. Learning to control mana is just like learning to walk on newborn legs. Only after mobilizing your body can you finally stand on your own. Teacher Isabel couldn't believe her eyes, watching me succeed. In the world of magic, only the top-tier mages learn magical abilities that far surpass ordinary people's. I looked at the magic blooming in the sky. Is this magic? She never thought that I would master it on my very first try. Could it be because I can see the mana in the atmosphere? The scene changes. She was standing behind me, and she called out to me. She patted my back firmly. I can't believe you activated the magic formula on your first try. I suddenly said, that magic just now wasn't beautiful. I remember seeing a dazzling, brilliant magic when I was a child. A truly beautiful and moving magic. But the feeling of this mana was different. I squatted on the ground, looking at the magic scroll, and asked her, is there something wrong with this spell? I pointed to the pattern on the paper and said, the way the mana flows it feels like that gargoyle. I looked up at her. My question left her at a loss for words. I suddenly understood. I'm not the only one in this world who wants to become a mage. I want to become a mage who can cast dazzling, beautiful, and moving magic. She looked at my yearning expression and suddenly said to me, if you think there's something wrong with the magic formula, you can just rewrite it yourself. I shot to my feet. I couldn't believe what she was saying was true. So I quickly asked her, how do you draw the magic formulas? The scene changes again. My father, carrying a sword, was walking through the shadows of a hallway when he suddenly stopped. He heard what sounded like a discussion outside. It was those guys who had just been bullying me. They were discussing how I had become so powerful. They are my father's apprentices. After my father left, they surrounded me. They had been looking forward to the academy vacation, just for the chance to see me and give me a different kind of swordsmanship lesson. Ever since they entered the swordsmanship academy and awakened their sword intent, my father required them to practice with each other. Because of that, they started teaching me swordsmanship as a way to vent their own past frustrations. The short-haired boy, sword in hand, demanded I fight him immediately. I just looked at him and gave a dismissive flick of my finger. My swordsmanship is a gulf you could never hope to cross. With that thought, I slowly walked toward the riverbank, sword in hand. I threw my sword straight into the water, sending a huge splash across the surface. My sword slowly sank to the bottom, as if I were casting away my entire past with it. Standing by the river, I stared at the calm surface of the water and made a decision. I would never wield a sword again. I'm going to become a magician. The short-haired boy's eyes went wide. couldn't believe what was happening. Then, he and the others burst out laughing. You threw away your sword? What, are you planning to run? Suddenly, the short-haired boy charged, swinging his sword at my back while laughing like a maniac. The blade in his hand moved so fast it was just a blur. He was sure he had already won. Watching this unfold, I wasn't the least bit flustered. The short-haired boy was reinforcing his body with sword aura, but I just slightly turned. His sword struck nothing but air. I looked at him and said, that's nowhere near good enough. You have to treat the sword as an extension of your body, not just a tool. Furious, the short-haired boy began swinging wildly at me, but none of his strikes even came close. Still not giving up, he leapt into the air, bringing his sword down towards me. I sent the short-haired boy flying. A single punch would have been enough to keep him down for good. I watched him sitting on the ground, all his previous arrogance gone. But he was still shouting, calling me a coward. I brought my fist down right on top of his head, making sure he wouldn't be getting up again. It was only then that he finally understood. He wasn't facing some loser who'd abandoned the sword, but a monster who could effortlessly crush all his pride. His friends scrambled to drag the short-haired boy away. I glanced at the sword he'd left behind. He probably wouldn't be bothering me again for a while. A moment ago, Father overheard their conversation and came out to ask what had happened. They all rushed to tell Father what had just happened with me, but they didn't dare to tell him that I had just defeated them. Father looked at them sternly and demanded to know what really happened. So the short-haired boy told him how I had first abandoned my sword and then defeated him with my bare hands. My father was completely stunned to hear it. He couldn't believe I'd beaten them all with my bare hands. They finally realized that all their previous mockery and taunts had just been a big joke. My father told them to get their injuries treated, so it wouldn't affect tomorrow's schedule. Father's orders were to be obeyed without question by his disciples. Father, wearing a deep purple cloak, held his sword and looked in the direction of the fight. A knowing smile touched his lips. It's time to teach him about the heart of the sword. The young man casually burned the Academy's acceptance letter, leaving his father completely shocked. It was an invitation from the world's most prestigious swordsmanship academy, but I had zero interest. In my past life, I had already attended that academy, graduated, and reached the pinnacle of the art of the sword. This time, I wanted to learn magic instead. Just a moment ago, Isabel was explaining the fundamentals of magical formulas to me. She told me that magic also requires knowledge to be wielded properly. And while my intuition isn't bad, I still need to learn more to properly use magical formulas. She said that if I wanted to learn more, she'd be willing to lend me all of her books. As soon as I heard that, I couldn't help but rush over to the library corner. Take as many as you want, she said. I have no need for any of these books. Because all my knowledge is in my brain, I was carrying a thick stack of books. I had to read everything related to magic formulas. With her hands on her hips, she asked if I was really going to take all of them. I was just saying I didn't think you were being serious. Just as I was hugging the books and getting ready to leave, she suddenly called out to me. Right now, you're a mage with circuits overflowing with magical power. You have to be careful of sword energy, or you'll be killed. I was holding the thick stack of books, and when I heard her words, I stopped in my tracks. I couldn't help but think of my father. The scene changes. I was on a horse, looking at the village in the distance. Staring at the familiar surroundings, I felt as if I had returned to the past. I hadn't seen my father in a very long time. By now, his hair was completely white, and he was lying weakly in bed. When my father saw it was me, he spoke excitedly. Oscar, you've finally come to see me. He raised his hand, asking me to come closer, saying he had something to tell me. As I lowered my head, he said, you truly have the talent I always thought you did. In the end, swordsmanship is the right choice for you. He placed his hand on my shoulder and patted it gently. I suddenly remembered he used to do the exact same thing to me when I was a child. He personally pushed me onto that dead-end path, one paved with blood and glory, but one that also left me utterly alone. The scene changes. I was back at 14 years old, looking at the acceptance letter in my hand. I looked at the familiar sword academy. This time, I was going to say goodbye to it. Father, this time, I'm going to make you agree to let me enter the magic academy. At the academy, my father was standing by a fire, holding his long sword, waiting for me. I walked towards him with the acceptance letter in hand. I need you to sign this letter for me. I had to get his signature to enter the magic academy. My father looked at me, confused, and said, what's this about? I can sign something like this anytime. I happily handed the letter to him. I finally let out a sigh of relief. He then took the letter from my hands, opened it, and took a look. My father's eyes flew wide open. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This wasn't an acceptance letter from the Sword Academy at all. Oscar, why do you want to learn magic? You were born my son. You were raised on the edge of a blade. I looked at my father dejectedly and said, do you remember when I told you I wanted to use magic? My father angrily threw the acceptance letter to the Magic Academy on the ground. He pointed at me sternly and said, you were just a child then. I thought you were just being willful. My father's hand shoved my shoulder. You are not allowed to study magic. As his hand landed on my shoulder, he felt something strange. My father was thrown back by the magic emanating from my body. He said to me furiously, "You've actually mastered magic?" "I mastered magic because it's the only way to truly convince you to let me study it." "What exactly are you trying to prove? Why do you need to convince me?" "Oscar, I already know. You defeated my apprentice with your bare hands. That proves you have a talent for swordsmanship. Even though I know I'm talented with a sword, I still want to learn magic." My father roared, "Don't you understand? As long as you stick to the path of the sword, you will undoubtedly succeed. Even though I think you're right. I've already made up my mind. Success in swordsmanship can't bring me happiness." Hearing my words, he froze on the spot. He stared at me blankly. Clutching his forehead, he muttered to himself, "So that was the reason." I watched my father's expression. Had he actually agreed? Suddenly, he covered half his face with his hand, the corner of his mouth twisting into a maniacal smile. I was so scared a cold sweat slid down my cheek. My father pointed at me and said, "You haven't forgotten what happens when those two powers flow through your circuits, have you?" I suddenly remembered my teacher's warning not to use my sword for now. My father drew his sword and said that if I insisted on going down the wrong path, he would beat some sense into me. "You might not accept it now, but one day, you'll thank me for this." I replied coldly, "That day will never come." I took out the acceptance letter from the Swordsmanship Academy and said, "Father, I'm not choosing swordsmanship anymore." And with that, I threw the letter into the nearby fireplace. My father stared at me in disbelief. He actually thought a few harsh words would be enough to make me submit. But he didn't know I was no longer the boy who could be ordered around. As he walked away, he said, "Fine, do what you want. I'd like to see if you can even learn magic." Suddenly, my father drew his sword. The sound of the blade being unsheathed tore through the sky. He swung a whirlwind scan net slash at me. A cold smile played on my lips. I dodged his sword with just a slight turn of my body, because I could see right through his attack. Even though he was shrouded in his sword aura, it was as clear as if I were holding the blade myself. He taught me this when I was a child. It's been carved into my very bones. Fragments of memory flashed by, the past overlapping with the scene before my eyes. With his sword in hand, my father swung at me again. The aura from his sword was an overwhelming force that crushed everything. I was knocked back by its power. There's no denying it, my father is the model all swordsmen strive to be. He looked at me and said, "You're not so bad yourself. I doubt there's a second person in the guild with as much talent as you." He held out his hand to me. "Stop being so stubborn, come back and continue your sword training. Are you trying to get me to give up just because you can't hit me? How is that possible? You idiot, I'm not that kind of person." "Father, to you, it seems talent is more important than anything else. But I also have something I absolutely cannot back down from." I pulled a pen-like weapon from my pouch. My father laughed scornfully. "What is that thing? Are you planning to use that as a sword?" "This is a magic wand for beginners." I looked at the magic wand in my hand, thinking Isabel said that using magic requires knowledge. I don't have that knowledge yet. But I'm not afraid, because my father doesn't have it either. He will never be able to predict what I'm about to do. The man had only participated in the magic level placement exam, yet he left the top-tier mages completely stunned. Just by using a novice magic wand, he had defeated 5 targets. The scene was unbelievable to everyone present. What they didn't know was that, in my previous life, I had already mastered magic completely. Just now, as I was putting on my backpack, getting ready to go to the Magic Academy, I heard familiar footsteps behind me. I turned to look. As I expected, it was my father. Seeing that I was leaving for the academy, he gave me a word of caution. "In this world, there are many who have spent just as much time studying magic as you have practicing swordsmanship. While I may not have the right to criticize your choice, I hope you absolutely do not allow yourself to break." I looked at my father with determination in my eyes and said, "I'll be fine. After all, there's nothing in this world more frightening than you." My father laughed. "Am I really that terrifying in your eyes?" I said my goodbyes to my father, shouldered my bag, and left. This time, I could finally choose for myself. The scene changes. I pick up a piece of paper. Written on it was, "Asaf has left Salor." This meant that I could finally take the magic exam. I gazed at the magic tower piercing the clouds, the pinnacle that countless mages spend their entire lives striving for. Inside, students were holding their wands, practicing spells from their books. Just then, I saw a band of dwarves joyfully welcoming the new students. I looked up and saw a few students flying on broomsticks. So this was the Imperial Kirk Magic Academy. The atmosphere here was completely different from the School of Architecture. I watched the dwarf band in front of me. They looked kind of familiar, because they resembled golems. But at the same time, they were different. As I was wondering about this, a familiar voice spoke from behind me. "If you keep dawdling, you're going to be late for registration." It was Professor Isabel. I told her happily, I haven't been slacking off at all. I can do so much more now than before. She replied cheerfully, "Oh, really? In that case, you'll have to show me something impressive later." Suddenly, I noticed a crowd of people up ahead. So I asked Professor Isabel what was going on. She explained. They're holding a magic placement exam. New students are divided into 2 classes based on whether or not they possess magical abilities. But above those 2 classes, there's another special class for the exceptionally gifted. A class called Stage 1. This exam is simply a way to scout for that kind of talent. I said excitedly, I want to take that test, too. But she told me, you should avoid the Stage 1 exam. The students who make it into Stage 1 are monsters. Every last one of them is an elite. They've been immersed in magic since they were children. Professor Isabel looked at me and said, you're not qualified to even try. But it was like I didn't even hear her. I said excitedly, but that means I could learn advanced magic there. She put her head in her hands, speechless. It seems like nothing I say is going to get through to you. She patted my shoulder and said, if you're so curious, go take a look for yourself. In the exam area, 2 people were dueling, and a crowd had gathered outside to watch them. Just then, a boy with short hair raised his wand to the sky, and his spell hit its target. The short-haired boy clasped his hands in joy. I won. I can get into Stage 1. So that's the test, you just have to hit the target with magic. If that's all it is. I can do that too. My words seemed to stun everyone there, but all I could see was my chance to learn advanced magic. From behind me, I heard a scornful scoff. I turned around and saw a boy with silver hair. The silver-haired boy said sternly, a commoner like you has no right to be here. I quickly explained, I heard that any new student could participate, so I came. After hearing what I said, they all started whispering. This really wasn't a place for someone like me. So this is what Professor Isabel meant. It seems that in this class, anyone who isn't from a noble family gets shunned. Just then, the silver-haired boy pushed me aside. Just stand there quietly and watch me. The magic proctor started searching for the silver-haired boy's name on a scroll to see if he was qualified for the test. As I watched the silver-haired boy's back, I felt a pang of envy that he got to participate. The silver-haired boy raised his wand and declared, a place among the elite belongs only to those who have dedicated their entire lives to magic since birth. Then, the silver-haired boy unleashed his magic, a spell that could freeze anything in existence. Every single student there was stunned, without exception. I was shocked too. I couldn't believe how powerful he was. Gasps echoed through the crowd. As expected of the ruthless Gelothus family, and that's not even his true power. The silver-haired boy said smugly, if you can't use decent magic, you're not welcome here. I looked at him and said, so this is the magic you've poured everything into? It's not that impressive. The silver-haired boy stared at me in shock, unable to believe what he had just heard. But I acted as if I hadn't heard him and walked right past. A moment ago, I was worried about whether I could even get into the elite class. But seeing your magic has given me some confidence back. I took out my novice magic wand and prepared to take my turn. The other students were whispering among themselves. Is he really going to compete with that basic wand? The silver-haired boy also gave me a taunting look and said, there's no way you can beat me with that thing, he said, full of confidence. My magic is flawless. After all, I am a member of the Glacis, the clan of ice. A commoner like him is nothing to worry about. The magic teacher looked at the silver-haired boy and remarked, I never expected a student at this level to be able to cast such a textbook perfect spell. It looks like he's the clear choice for the class representative. I seemed to tune out the noisy chatter from the crowd. I just focused intently on my aim. A student in the arena shouted out, if you can't aim, just give up. Don't waste everyone's time. Even the magic teacher didn't seem to have high hopes for me. But I held my position, unmoving, waiting for the perfect moment. My eyes were locked on the target. Now, with a whoosh, my magic wand erupted in a golden light and the spell shot forward. I watched as the object I hit fell to the ground. I did it. The magic teacher stared at me in astonishment. What did you just do? I couldn't even follow it. A student in the arena pointed at me. Did he just hit 5 targets? But he only used a basic spell. Just then, the silver-haired boy scoffed. That's it? I thought he was going to do something impressive. What a complete waste of my time watching him. I looked at the magic teacher and asked, did I fail? But the teacher announced loudly, you hit 5 targets. Without a doubt, you've passed. I've finally passed the first stage of the magic exam. I can learn advanced magic now. The man had only used a basic spell in the magic assessment, yet it sent a shockwave through the heart of the academy's dean. Because what he'd just done wasn't casting a spell, it was rewriting the very formula of magic itself. This left all the other students in disbelief. But what they didn't know was, I can see the magic that no one else can. And just a moment ago, I was walking down a path at the Magic Academy, on my way to the classroom. I suddenly stopped in my tracks. I looked up and said in a low voice, who's there? I could feel that this mage was incredibly powerful, because his spell could actually make the target move on its own. With a wave of his hand, a blade of magic light appeared out of nowhere. His skill was the real deal. He walked over, step by step, and greeted me. It turned out he was Balsamus, the dean of the Kirk Magic Academy of the Empire. I panicked on the spot and hurriedly bowed to apologize. However, the dean just laughed heartily at me. I was the one spying on you just now. You spotted me so quickly. You have sharp eyes. Hearing this, my eyes went wide in an instant, and I broke out in a cold sweat. Dean has been watching me this whole time? I'm on his radar now. This is big trouble. Just then, a familiar necklace caught my eye, and a chill ran down my spine. I stared at the pendant glowing faintly on the Dean's chest, and the memories of my death in my past life came flooding back. The Dean held out his hand for a greeting, but I just clenched my fists, suppressing my rage. Slowly, I raised my hand and gripped his with all my might. My knuckles turned white, hiding the killing intent in my grip. The corner of the Dean's mouth curved into a knowing smile, but his eyes held a testing gaze I couldn't quite decipher. My eyes shot wide open, and a cold sweat beaded on my forehead. Though he recognized me all along suddenly, an overwhelming force exploded from him. I was sent flying, slamming hard onto the ground. It felt like every bone in my body was about to shatter. From the shadows, the Dean spoke. Your judgment is as sharp as ever, he said, flying towards me with his staff. Is this just my intuition? I roared, clutching the object in my hand. Are you here to kill me? Do you really think with just that flimsy little staff that you can defeat me? The Dean flicked his wrist down. A blade of blue wind came slicing at me. I threw myself to the side to dodge it. The blue wind blade grazed my clothes and flew past, blasting a huge crater in the ground behind me. A blue barrier slammed down around me, trapping me inside with no escape. I gritted my teeth, my eyes turning ice cold in an instant. If this is how you want it, then I'll give you everything I've got. I pressed my fingertips to the ground, and a golden magic circle hummed as it lit up. Runes surged frantically along its patterns. This power was more than enough to shatter that barrier. A single, flame-wreathed bullet shot out, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. I was going to blast this damn barrier and that old man to bits. The flame hit the Dean square in the chest. He was thrown back, struggling to stay upright as he floated in the air. The force of the fire bullet stunned the Dean. His eyes went wide. His face was a mask of pure shock and disbelief. Then, the Dean snapped out of it. Instantly, he raised his wand and unleashed a blast of blue magic right at me. My gaze sharpened. I quickly drew my own wand, preparing to face his attack head-on. When I realized I couldn't break the spell, I immediately changed targets to the Dean himself. The Dean looked completely bewildered, never expecting that I would dare to attack him directly. I was just as confused. I had no idea what he was trying to pull. I was crouched on the ground, struggling to catch my breath. Leaves swirled around us from the impact. The Dean taunted me. Out of mana, are we? You didn't kill me when you had the chance. Now, it's your turn to die, I said weakly. Dean, you have to be kidding me. You're testing me, but why? What's the point of all this? The Dean stroked his beard and said slowly. So you figured it out. In this place, many see magic as a special privilege. But the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, and opportunities slip away quietly. My intention was for you to experience that firsthand. And after that little test, I discovered. It seems I have underestimated the depths of your potential. I quickly asked, so if I draw too much attention to myself, I'll be targeted just like this? Is that what you're trying to say, Dean? The Dean crossed his arms, not even bothering to look at me, and said flatly. Yes. My expression darkened. So in this world model, genius summoners are simply not allowed to exist. That's what the mages in my past life said, too. A genius like me shouldn't even be alive in this world, the Dean replied, crossing his arms. Someone said something similar before I shot my head up. My voice was filled with urgency. Dean, please, tell me who it was. The Dean warned me. If you learn their identities, you could bring that same danger down upon yourself. No matter what happens, the first rule is to protect your own power. I muttered to myself, I'll definitely protect myself. Suddenly, a faint blue light emanated from the Dean. He raised his hand and cast a barrier. Starting today, I will teach you how to gain the power to protect yourself. In my past life, I collapsed in a pool of my own blood. I felt the warm blood cover my face as my consciousness faded away. If it weren't for that last spark of life, I would have been completely finished. By the time I snapped out of it, cold sweat was already trickling down my temples. The Dean's voice pulled me back to reality. Don't get lost in the past. From now on, I will teach you how to protect yourself. My eyes fell on the necklace around the Dean's neck. So I was your pawn from the very beginning. I finally couldn't resist asking, that pendant, what exactly is it? The Dean gently tapped the pendant with his fingertip. This, he said, is about you. I stared at the star-like sigil that had erupted above my head. That magic circle, it was like I was seeing my past life all over again. The Dean's words hit me like a hammer. Magic Saint means the same thing as Sword Saint. It represents the highest rank. The Dean leaned down. Now, I'm giving this to you. I took it and examined it closely. It was a golden insignia. The Dean was now shrouded in a blue aura. He warned me, you must not lose this. It's your only trump card. The Dean's figure vanished completely into the aura. I clutched the golden insignia and said to the empty air, I swear I will protect myself. So this is the headmaster's magic. There isn't a single flaw in the flow of his magic. I quickly snapped back to my senses. This is no time to be amazed. I will master magic. I used to think that just learning magic would be enough to satisfy me. But among those who hurt me in my past life was a magic saint. If I get the chance, they'll definitely come after me again. This time, I'll strike first. I'll crush them all under my heel. I will surpass the man I once was, the Sword Saint. It was the man's first time taking the exam, but he left every elite noble student completely stunned. All because I, a commoner, had just become the first person in history to ever make it into the top class. Everyone there found the scene unbelievable, but what they didn't know was that I am the Sword Saint, reborn. And this time, I will shatter their noble arrogance to pieces. The dean's words kept replaying in my mind. Right now, I have to get strong enough to protect myself. Back in my room, I closed my eyes and focused on my training. Blue magic energy erupted around me. The power of the Sword Saint was returning. Just as the power finally stabilized, an idea suddenly popped into my head. Could running make it easier to breathe? If I constantly release magic while I run, the capacity of my magic circuits will increase. I understood in an instant. This is the key to getting stronger. It looks like all I need now is some opportunities to get some combat experience. I opened my eyes and looked around. I'm still in my bedroom. Where am I supposed to get combat experience in here? So I immediately got dressed, threw open the door, and walked out. I started walking, with only one thought in my mind. I must become stronger. The scene changes to a banner symbolizing the top class, a noble flag, which comes into view. The classroom instantly erupted into chaos. The students were all gossiping. Did you hear? A commoner joined our class. He's the first commoner to ever get into the elite class. I heard he did terribly on every section of the test. The silver-haired boy overheard their discussion. A sarcastic smirk appeared on his face. He turned his head and said coldly, "The nobility won't last forever." How pathetic. Just then, a dark figure appeared at the classroom door. The sound of his footsteps grew closer as he walked in. Seeing the person who had arrived, the students all stood up in shock. The silver-haired boy couldn't help but turn to look. Suddenly, a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. Unable to hide his disgust for commoners, he shouted at the newcomer. "What are you doing here? What right do you have to be in the elite class? You, get out of here, now. You don't belong here." I looked at their furious faces and said calmly, "What's the matter? Why are you all so angry?" So, it was the silver-haired boy who was giving me a hard time earlier. Just as I thought, he's in this class too. I looked up and suddenly saw a familiar figure. It was her. The girl had her hair in two pigtails. She was wearing glasses and sitting on a high platform far away, engrossed in a book. Just then, a bookmark covered in a daisy pattern fluttered to the ground. I bent down and picked up the bookmark covered in daisies. Holding the bookmark, I walked up to her and said with a smile, "Is this your bookmark?" The girl took the bookmark, her eyes instantly lighting up. "Thank you for picking it up for me." Seeing how happy she was, I smiled and said, "It seems you really like flowers." She looked up abruptly, her eyes wide with surprise. She asked blankly, "How did you know?" "Because I think it's a very beautiful flower. My name is Oscar. It's nice to meet you. May I sit next to you?" She smiled and replied, "Of course. Please, sit. I'm Lily Lowell." Suddenly, a voice rang out. "It seems everyone is here." The voice was heard, but no one could be seen. The students looked around in terror. Whose voice is that? There was only a single, lone book on the teacher's desk. No one was there. Suddenly, the book on the desk began to flip its pages wildly. Every page was filled with dense text. Book pages from all over the room were swept up in a swirl of golden magic. The surrounding students all screamed in fear. Amidst the chaos of the noisy classroom, the sound of high heels was suddenly heard. Footsteps stopped. A woman with an incredibly powerful presence stepped forward and began to speak. "Hello, everyone. My name is Ruth. I will be in charge of this first class group. Since you all passed the selection exam, it means you have already proven your talents. Therefore, starting next week, we will begin practical combat lessons with monsters." I hadn't expected to get real combat experience so soon. This was exactly what I wanted. Ruth explained the requirements for participation in order to ensure the teams were balanced during training. We will be forming 5-person squads. The students below asked in confusion, "Does balanced strength mean magical power?" "No, it doesn't. It's based on the total amount of mana your bodies can contain." Hearing this, we couldn't help but ask, confused, "Then how is that measured?" A knowing, profound smile crept across Ruth's lips. It was enough to send a shiver down her spine. Suddenly, a magic circle on her back began to glow. Adjusting her glasses, she said sheepishly, "Actually, I've already finished measuring everyone. Class, each and every one of you has a golden orb of light above your head. The orb above your head represents your total mana capacity, but the brightness of each person's orb is different. The brighter the light, the stronger your mana. The dimmer the light, the weaker your mana capacity." Ruth scanned the orbs above the students' heads and noticed that a few had already reached the level of a mage. I wondered what level that commoner was. I stared at the faint orb of light above my own head, wondering what this magic was even for. The whole class erupted in laughter. They were all discussing how a commoner will always be a commoner. All. Listening to their ridicule left a bitter taste in my mouth. Whatever, I don't have time to dwell on it now. First, I had to figure out who to team up with. Just then, a hand landed on my shoulder. I turned in surprise to look at her. Would you like to be on my team? It was my desk mate, Molly. I would, I said excitedly. Girls who like flowers really are angels. Suddenly, Molly's expression turned serious as she said, but we have to ask Mr. Levin first. I asked, confused, who's Mr. Levin? The red-haired boy next to us clasped his head and said with a sneer, who told you to invite him to join our team? I quickly stepped forward and said, my name is Oscar. If you'll let me join, I would be extremely grateful. The red-haired boy listened to what I said, and sized me up for a good while. Just when I thought he was going to refuse, he slammed his palm down hard on the desk and declared, I suppose protecting the weak is a noble's duty. I'll let you join our group. I'll just treat you as our baggage handler, anyway. The moment the red-haired boy finished speaking, all the students around us turned to stare. Just then, Molly came up to comfort me, saying, don't let them get to you. Students at the Nobles Academy start learning magic at a very young age, so there's bound to be a difference in skill. As we walked, I explained to Molly, I don't care what they say or think. I'll prove myself with my abilities. It was the man's first time taking the exam, yet he shocked the Magic Academy's top S-rank proctor. It was because in the Misty Forest, with a single kick, he shattered the high-level spatial barrier that even powerful mages were helpless against. This scene left even the self-proclaimed genius, the red-haired boy, completely frozen on the spot. But what they didn't know was that in his past life, this man was the world's most powerful sword god. Just moments earlier, after Ruth had announced the requirements for the practical combat class, she had left the classroom. Suddenly, someone called out to her from behind. Professor Ruth, please wait a moment. Ruth turned and looked at him coldly. Is there something you need? I just wanted to ask. Why is that commoner in the honors group? That commoner, he barely knows any magic. Besides, his mana is pathetically low. I don't think he deserves to be in the honors group at all. I think someone with zero experience in the honors group will fall behind very quickly. But Ruth just smiled and asked, a commoner? Are you referring to Oscar? I certainly don't think so. He only awakened his magic 6 months ago. Do you still think he's not worthy? The silver-haired boy's face froze instantly. The arrogance he held so high just moments ago was shattered by a single sentence from Professor Rose. But then her voice rang out again. He will become much stronger. In a few months, Oscar will be the one saying the things you just did. This is the real reason we conduct field training. The silver-haired boy stared blankly as Professor Rose walked away. He never imagined that the commoner he'd looked down on would, in just a few months, catch up to the noble-born skill he was so proud of. The scene changes. Molly has brought Oscar to the library, and she filled him in on the academy's situation. By now, they've at least reached the skilled mage level of magic, I said with admiration. The skilled mage level means you can be deployed to fight magical beasts, even if it's only with raw magic. For them to reach that level at their age, that alone is impressive. Just then, Molly asked me, Oscar, how many months have you been studying magic? I've been studying for 6 months now. Molly was so happy she practically jumped. She pumped her fist and shouted, you're the most amazing one. You reached this level after only 6 months of studying. Suddenly, Molly leaned forward, grabbing my clothes with both hands as she spoke. How did you do it? Are you some kind of genius? I looked at the excited Molly, and couldn't help but smile. Maybe this really is my natural talent. Then I suddenly remembered something. I wanted to ask you, who's the red-haired boy? Molly patiently explained, his name is Levin. The Levin family is an extremely prominent clan. All the other families around them are vying to curry favor with them for protection. Levin might be a bit rough around the edges, but his skills are the real deal. When things get serious, he'll protect us. Hearing Molly's words, I closed my eyes with a sigh. I'm not going to miss this rare opportunity, but having Bane around might make things inconvenient. In the blink of an eye, the day of the practical combat exam arrived. The students were all gathered in small groups, discussing what might happen today. Suddenly, Professor Rose's voice rang out. All right, students, I will explain the training exercise one more time. This forest is inhabited by low-level monsters. Your mission is to survive one night in the forest. This is another practical assignment, following the selection exam. I will give each team leader a sheet of magic paper. It contains a defensive barrier and a signal flare spell. If the situation becomes critical, please use the magic paper. The students began murmuring amongst themselves. That sounds pretty simple. If we get attacked by a monster, we can just use it, right? However, Professor Rose coldly announced, any team that does will be expelled from the top class. All the students were stunned right where they stood. They were floored by the news of being demoted, all crying out in disbelief. The entire area fell dead silent. Everyone's face was tense. This just proved how important it was for the nobles to remain in the top class. Just then, the red-haired boy spoke with confidence. As long as I'm here, we will never retreat. I am a noble among nobles. I will protect every single one of you. The whistle blew, and the forest mission began. Everyone gathered together to confirm their direction. They were about to set off when suddenly, a huge backpack was thrown onto the ground with a thud. The red-haired boy put his hands on his hips and said to me, "Stop staring and get the luggage." Jasmine looked at the mountain of luggage and said, "This is way too much luggage." But I pulled her aside and told her I could handle it. After all, I'd already promised I would be the one to carry it. The red-haired boy looked at me and sneered, "I just love people who know their place." As I was walking behind him with Jasmine, carrying the giant bag, he impatiently threw out a comment. "Don't slow me down." But a moment later, the boy who had just been talking so tough was now completely exhausted, sweat pouring down his face. The other students around us were all fussing over him, but when they asked if he was okay, he stubbornly insisted, "The ground here is just really rough. It's hard to walk." But I just smiled and said to him, "Can you even stand up? Need me to give you a hand?" Faced with my taunt, he gritted his teeth in anger. He suddenly leapt to his feet, pushed me away, and shouted, "Shut up. I don't need you. I can do it myself." Just then, Jasmine was also having a hard time walking, so I quickly supported her to help her conserve her energy. I looked at the other students, every one of them panting for breath, but I felt completely relaxed. I didn't feel tired at all. We'd been walking for half the day, and we hadn't even encountered a single monster. It was probably because this area is managed by the academy. Suddenly, my eyes widened. I saw blue magical energy. We were surrounded by a shroud of blue magic, and directly in front of us was a white, shimmering light. As we walked towards the light, I suddenly tensed up. I realized, the barrier here felt similar to the one in Isabel's workshop. I roared, "Don't go any further. It's dangerous up ahead." But the red-haired boy just said arrogantly, "Who do you think you are, ordering me around? I'm going to see for myself what's up there." The man just gave a casual wave, but it left the genius noble, Levin, stunned on the spot. It was because he had just used the most basic magic to save a student who was about to be torn apart by a monster. The scene was unbelievable to everyone present, but what they didn't know was, I had long since seen through the true nature of all magic in this world. And just a moment ago, I sensed that the barrier in the forest was similar to the one in Isabel's workshop. Suddenly, a magic circle lit up beneath our feet, and a mysterious force pulled us into it. Scarlet glow instantly enveloped all of us. I slammed my foot down on the magic circle. The red markings instantly shattered. Jasmine clutched her staff tightly, and cried out, "What's happening?" I realized this was spatial magic. "We have to get out now, or we'll be trapped in here forever." I gripped my staff tightly and yelled, "Everyone, get your staves ready." In an instant, the space shattered like glass, and red light rained down with the broken shards. As the magic circle was broken, we could finally see our surroundings clearly. Jasmine turned to me and said, "This doesn't look like the forest we were just in." Suddenly, they saw something on a tree up ahead. As they got closer, they found the number 5 carved into it. Seeing the number on the tree, the students suddenly realized, "This is training ground 5. I watched as they talked amongst themselves. "This is a training ground for the upperclassmen. How did we end up here?" I suddenly remembered how the markings on the magic circle shattered the moment I stepped on it. Could that magic circle have been a trap set by someone? I quickly turned to the red-haired boy and said, "This is an emergency. We need to use the magic paper to get help." He took the magic paper and carefully looked at the runes written on it. However, with a sharp tear, he ripped the magic paper in his hands to shreds. I stared at him in disbelief. The other students rushed towards him, shouting, "What are you doing?" That was our only chance to call for help. But he acted like we were overreacting, thinking it was just a teleportation circle the academy forgot to clear out. He said confidently, "This is an opportunity. If we get through this training, the academy's evaluation of us will be even higher." Before I could argue, he had already turned and started walking. Waving to the group, he said, "Let's get going, everyone." Molly, clutching her staff, begged me not to leave her side. I followed behind the group, watching the red-haired boy's back as he forged ahead on his own. I couldn't help but sigh. Suddenly, I froze. My pupils contracted. A dangerous presence was closing in on us. The next second, an alpha wolf led its pack charging out of the woods. The fluorescent lights above flickered like will-o'-the-wisps. That 4-eyed giant wolf lunged to the front. Its fangs were almost at our noses. The students scrambled back in terror. The red-haired boy's eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty excitement. "They've come at the perfect time." I took out my beginner's magic wand, ready to fight at any moment. I was a little nervous, but this was a rare chance to get real combat experience. Just as I was getting ready, the red-haired boy shoved me aside. He sneered at me and said, "Step back, commoner. I'll show you how a noble fights." I just stared at him, dumbfounded. As the 4-eyed giant wolf's roar made everyone's ears ache. It leapt up, rushing towards the crowd with a foul stench. In that instant, the red-haired boy pulled his staff from his backpack. He raised the staff high, his eyes full of excitement as he said to me, "This is a real battle." The red-haired boy gripped the staff with both hands and slammed it into the ground. A magic circle at his feet suddenly lit up, flames spreading wildly along its patterns. With a crackle, the ground exploded, sending shards of rock flying. Amidst a deafening shatter, rock fragments filled the air. One of the wolves was thrown back by the blast. The red-haired boy plunged his staff deep into the rubble. His shoulders trembled slightly. It was clear that outburst had cost him a lot of energy. The students around him quickly closed in, casting spells to support him. In a flash of blue light, they instinctively divided their roles to provide cover, some taking the offense, and others on defense, creating a clear line between attack and protection. I couldn't help but marvel. So this is how the nobles fight. Their coordination was already at the level of master mages. The red-haired boy roared. Damn it, there are too many of them. Suddenly, a giant wolf pounced on a student. Terrified, the student dropped his staff and stumbled backwards. His foot slipped, and he fell flat on the ground. But the giant wolf's target wasn't him. The four-eyed wolf had its sights set on Molly. It had silently crept up behind her. Molly, clutching her flowers, was trembling all over. The four-eyed wolf lowered its body, locking its gaze on her. Terrified, Molly quickly chanted a spell. A pile of rubble shot up in front of the wolf, blocking it for a moment. But the next second, the four-eyed wolf lunged again, its blood-red maw wide open. Its fangs glinted coldly in the moonlight. Terrified, Molly stumbled backward. Her back slammed hard against the rock wall. There was nowhere left to run. I quickly chanted a spell, and a fireball erupted in the palm of my hand. It shot out like a wave of heat, slamming right into the four-eyed wolf. Its massive body, engulfed in flames, was thrown violently to the ground. The four-eyed wolf let out one last, deafening roar before it completely lost the strength to fight back. Molly threw her arms around me, tears still streaming down her face, and said, "That was terrifying. I was scared to death. Thank you for saving me." I quickly tried to calm her down. "It's okay, don't be afraid. The four-eyed wolf has been taken care of." The other students collapsed onto the rubble, gasping for breath. We had finally survived the brutal fight in the 5th training ground. The scene changes. By nightfall, the others were gathered around a campfire, but I was lying alone under a tree. The red-haired boy scoffed at me. "You commoners are so lucky. Getting to watch us fight," I said with a smile. "Yes, and your teamwork was perfect. You used your defensive magic to its absolute limit." The red-haired boy didn't expect me to say that. He just gave an awkward nod. After watching them work together, I realized that the only way to break through the power of magic is to make my own skills strong enough. Just then, Molly walked over with 2 cups of water. "Thank you for saving me today. I was the one telling you not to leave my side. But in the end, you were the one who protected me." I took the cup and replied with a smile. "Don't worry about it. It's my job to protect you. But, I wanted to ask you something. That defensive magic you were using during the fight, why did its strength seem to fluctuate?" The red-haired boy looked at me, speechless. "You don't even know that the closer magic is to the caster, the more powerful it is?" But Molly reassured me. "You don't have to worry about that. From a distance," he sneered, "a commoner is still a commoner." Molly patiently explained, "The farther magic travels from us, the more it returns to nature, turning back into mana. That's why spells eventually fade away. Magic is just about pouring the right amount of magical energy into a formula to cast it. If the energy and the formula don't match up, things can go wrong." I couldn't help but think if that's the case, then there must be a way to make it more efficient. Molly said with a smile, clutching her cup. "Looks like I made this a little too strong." I stared at the cup in my hand, my eyes suddenly widening. I think I suddenly understood what was happening. Molly saw the look on my face. She quickly asked if I was okay. I watched the water in the cup ripple. This is it. This is the key to strengthening the power that fills a container. I gripped the cup tightly. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. This was the same principle as sword chi. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, a figure dressed in black was staring at a magic circle before them. Through it, the masked figure could spy on Oscar and the other students. After hearing what Oscar said, they couldn't help but tighten their grip on the whip in their hand. The masked figure marveled. "As expected of the sword saint, but for now, I'd rather you just stay quiet." The man casually unleashed a wave of magic, shocking the Magic Academy's top S-rank examiner. Because with that single, effortless blow, he had just forced back a Demon Lord-level dragon. Everyone present found the scene unbelievable, but what they didn't know was, in my past life, I had already researched magic to its very core. Right now, Professor Ruth stood by the bonfire, watching the students who had dropped out huddled together for warmth. After the day's ordeal, the students were still visibly shaken. Professor Ruth's voice held a hint of satisfaction. Only 20% of the participants had dropped out. It seems this year's group performed exceptionally well. Just then, a faint sound echoed from the quiet assessment grounds. It was time for the shift change. A female professor holding a magic staff approached slowly. She was none other than Professor Isabel of Creation. The two professors began discussing the assessment. Isabel stared at the students in the magic mirror, her eyes wide with shock. So this is their little survival performance, she commented in a low voice, her gaze fixed on the screen. They're performing exceptionally well, just as you'd expect from the top tier. Suddenly, Isabel's expression turned serious. Why can't I see Oscar and the others? Professor Ruth confessed, there's a problem with the familiar we're using for the broadcast. This is all very strange. The scene changes. I leaned against a tree, quietly staring into the cup in my hands. Molly and the others were resting by the campfire. They were discussing the day's events. Not far off, one student clutched their wand tightly, warily scanning the surroundings. I held my cup, appearing calm on the surface. But inside, my sword intent was circulating wildly. I was fiercely compressing and enhancing every single strand of it. Every ounce of power was coiled, ready to strike. A glint flashed in my eyes. What if I could compress and strengthen my magical power, just like I do with my sword intent? The next moment, the magical power within me erupted uncontrollably. The force of it made the very air tremble. I let out a low chuckle. This is the power I've been looking for. Suddenly, the sound of frantic footsteps erupted from the forest. Two students came scrambling towards us. The red-haired boy puffed out his chest, his tone arrogant. Another low-level critter? Leave this little thing to me. But just as he finished speaking, a blinding wave of fire erupted from behind him. The violent force instantly tore through the surrounding darkness. What is that? The red-haired boy shouted. It's a torrent of flame, Molly answered, her voice trembling. Just then, a giant, stitched-together claw slowly emerged from the darkness. It was a massive dragon, its entire body covered in stitches. Its single eye glowed with a green light. Its oppressive presence was enough to crush the entire forest. The red-haired boy and Molly looked on, in utter disbelief at the scene before them. My own expression turned grim as I stared at the dragon. Looks like today's assessment is about to turn into a fight to the death. The great dragon suddenly opened its cavernous jaws. Its sharp fangs glinted coldly as it let out a savage roar at us. How can there be a dragon here? The red-haired boy screamed, his voice shaking. That's something only a Demon Lord-class hero could defeat. My eyes narrowed. This is no accident. Someone's been targeting us from the start. Help, but he'd completely forgotten he had already torn the signal flare to shreds. Seeing this, Molly tightened her grip on her staff, her face filled with despair. I gritted my teeth and said in a low voice, we have no choice. We have to fight it head on. It's the only way we'll survive. Molly let out a choked scream, demanding in disbelief, you're actually going to fight a dragon? Hearing this, the other students' eyes lit up. With Levin's defense magic, we can definitely do it. When Levin didn't respond, one of them suggested they just try to withstand the attacks until the professors arrived. The next moment, the red-haired boy raised his magic wand and slammed it hard into the ground. A magic circle lit up beneath his feet. He roared, Earthen Shield, launch. With a loud rumble, a thick barrier instantly formed around him. The students cried out in alarm, what are you doing? Didn't you say you were going to protect us? The red-haired boy yelled, panting. You idiots, that flimsy shield is useless. I refuse to die here. They exchanged a look. Oscar's right, since it has its sights on us. Our only choice is to charge forward. Molly gripped her staff tightly. Her eyes hardened as she said in a low voice. Let's fight, she shouted, raising her staff high. Spear of the Earth, Gedrick. She then summoned a rock spear and sent it hurtling straight toward the dragon. The students, their faces a mix of sweat and anticipation, asked with trembling voices. Did we do it? But the dragon wasn't even knocked down. Instead, it flew into a rage, raising its giant claw to crush them all. They were so scared their faces turned pale. Without high-level magic, there was no way to beat that dragon. Just then, Molly turned to Oscar and said, I'll get its attention. You go get help, quickly. I looked at Molly, her eyes filled with resolve, as I shouldered the responsibility of getting help. The dragon stomped its foot, unleashing a terrifying force, as if it wanted to completely obliterate us. The students collapsed to the ground, their voices trembling. I don't want to die, it's all over. Suddenly, the dragon erupted in a blinding light and began to frantically absorb the magic in the atmosphere. So, it was using the Earth's magic as its power source. No wonder our attacks had no effect on it. I sneered inwardly. The dragon's tricks were nothing special. Blue light enveloped my body, my eyes filled with killing intent, and I charged recklessly toward the dragon. The man just casually cast a single spell, yet it left the noble elite students of the Magic Academy utterly stunned. It was because he had just used the precise control of a swordsman, combined with a flame barrier to instantly kill the Demon Lord-level evil dragon. This scene seemed unbelievable to everyone present. But what they didn't know was that I am the world's greatest sword saint. Magic is just a new skill I picked up on a whim. At that moment, I raised my hand to take on that evil dragon's deadly breath from the staff. The evil dragon was desperately absorbing all the magic in the world, preparing to unleash its ultimate attack. A single breath from this evil dragon could easily be considered a natural disaster. If I could refine this natural power in my hands, The force would be earth-shattering. With a loud bang, the evil dragon opened its massive jaw and spewed out a fiery breath powerful enough to overturn the heavens and the earth. Seeing this, the noble students screamed and covered their heads, their faces contorted with fear. I calmly confronted the evil dragon, but Molly, worried, rushed towards me. My eyes narrowed, and I shouted, "Fireball Flame Domain." A giant magic circle materialized before me, instantly maxing out its flame power. Crimson flames shot into the sky, directly pushing back the evil dragon's breath. With a huge explosion, the crimson flames collided with the evil dragon. The flames pierced straight through the dragon's body. That arrogant, demon lord-level evil dragon was blasted until sparks flew from its body, and it crashed heavily to the ground from the sky. This group of noble students stared at the scene before them in disbelief. Scrambling and crawling backwards, even Molly had collapsed to the ground. She gripped her staff, her eyes wide speechless for a long moment. I glanced at the evil dragon on the ground. I tightened my grip on her trembling hand. It's all over now. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a mysterious figure cloaked in black was using magic to watch everything unfold through a scrying mirror. He muttered to himself. A first-year student actually managed to take down my chimera? The mysterious figure stared at Oscar. His brow furrowed as he watched the magic circle Oscar had unleashed. Where in the world did that power come from? He narrowed his eyes, his voice dripping with malice. You were lucky today, but sooner or later, you'll be kicked out of this academy for good. He let out a cold laugh as he watched Oscar in the mirror. Only those of noble blood should be able to command such sublime power. Back in the clearing, I stood amidst the wreckage and slowly raised my hand, feeling the residual warmth of the flames in my palm. I clenched my still burning fist, unable to contain the joy and excitement welling up inside me. Magical energy coursed through me. I had applied the principles of honing sword aura to refining magic. This is my own path of magic. The scene then cut to the once invincible evil dragon. Now beaten so badly its head was askew, blood pouring from its wounds, completely dead. The other two students were just stunned. They couldn't believe that a commoner could actually defeat a Demon King-level dragon. Just then, with a loud crash, the red-haired boy burst out from his rock cave. The hand he used to grip his staff was trembling, his face a mask of disbelief as he took in the scene. He stared at my slight frame from behind. I was saved by a commoner? Jasmine rushed over to me, her face full of worry. Oscar, what just happened? Did you really defeat that dragon? Just then, my legs gave out. My whole body pitched forward as my magical energy completely bottomed out. Jasmine was scared out of her wits. She let out a scream and rushed to catch me, but I just plopped right onto the ground. I braced my hands on my knees, catching my breath and feeling the utter exhaustion of having all my magic drained. I gritted my teeth. The backlash from that last spell. It felt like it was about to tear me apart. And just then, heavy footsteps echoed from the woods. We whipped our heads toward the source of the sound, our faces filled with terror. Jasmine's grip on her staff tightened, her hand trembling. Don't tell me there are more monsters in the forest. Crash. A giant foot slammed down, making the very ground tremble. I sensed the ripple of a teleportation circle, so I came to take a look. Just as I thought you found yourselves in some serious trouble, a woman stood on the shoulder of a stone golem, a wild and dangerous smile on her face. Students, are you all safe? Everyone stared up at her in shock. It was Professor Isabel. The moment I saw Professor Isabel, the tension left my body and I passed out. She glanced at the dead dragon on the ground. I'll be questioning each and every one of you about what exactly happened here. Jasmine and the other students gathered around my unconscious body, their faces filled with anxiety and worry. The red-haired boy, however, stood off to the side, watching it all with a cold expression. It was as if he felt none of this had anything to do with him. Isabel leaned against the golem's shoulder, a knowing smile playing on her lips. Dawn is breaking. It's about time to settle some accounts. The next day, I was sitting in the dean's office, recounting everything that had happened the day before. The dean listened, his expression grave, and let out a sigh. To think something like this could happen right under the academy's nose. I sat across from the dean, my expression calm, waiting for his next question. Suddenly, the dean's gaze grew cold, his tone turning to ice. It seems we have some bastards in our academy who specifically target talented commoners. I realized the dean wasn't accusing me, but talking about me. I just gritted my teeth and kept quiet, not daring to say a word. Seeing how tense I was, the dean spoke slowly. The fact that you managed to survive, you've already done incredibly well. I met the dean's gaze, my own filled with determination. I have to get stronger. I have to. I had finally found my starting point. But he wasn't happy when he heard what I had to say. Instead, he lowered his head in silence. Since actual harm has already been done. As the dean, there's something difficult I must tell you. The dean was cloaked in shadow, his voice sharp and cruel. You must leave this academy, and you are never to touch magic again. Now that they have their eyes on you, this is your only way to survive. Countless people in this world live happy lives without magic. Magic isn't everything. I stared at everything before me, my mind in turmoil. Did he mean I could never touch magic again for the rest of my life? I remembered the first time I ever summoned magic. My eyes crinkled into smiling crescents. I clenched my fists, grit my teeth, and roared, "There is no way I'm giving up just like this." I wiped the sweat from my forehead, my voice calm but deliberate. "I understand that you're worried about my safety. But if the people targeting me are right here, in this academy, then I have an idea.